Welcome to the CAD Office Training Guide series for FDOT Connect. I'm Candy Daffin, CAD Support Specialist. Today I'll be going through the Automated Quantities Workflow Training Guide. In this series of videos, I will take you step by step through each exercise from the guide. Today we'll start with Chapter 3 from the guide. Let's begin. The topics we will cover include how to create a QTD SRD file that references all models and design files for generating quantities. We'll go over the new Quantity Takeoff Manager tool, and we'll look at the new Summary of Quantities reports, their formats, and how to generate them and complete them for inclusion in the Estimated Quantities Report PDF. Let's jump right in with Exercise 3.1. For this exercise, we'll be creating another QTD SRD file, but this one will be used to reference all of the roadway models and design files, as well as the quantity shape files needed to generate the summary reports. Other components like drainage and signing a pavement marking can follow a similar process and create a master reference file if their quantity information is in multiple files. I'm starting from the Mainline 61 model file where we left off in the last video for chapters 1 and 2. But you can do this from any file within the project. In the Open Roads Modeling workflow, on the FDOT tab, in the Actions tool group, click Create File. We'll go through the same steps as before, but this time the counter will show 02. Check all the other settings, and if everything looks okay, click Create Open File. Once the file opens, we'll attach our references. In the Home tab, on the Primary Tool group, in the Attach Tools, we'll click for our Reference dialog. Select Attach Reference, and we'll start in the Roadway folder with our alignment file. The alignment file is critical for the Quantity Takeoff Manager, since it must be attached and displayed in the file for the tool to retrieve the station and offset location information for the summary reports. If your alignment is not attached or is turned off, the summary table will not get the location data. Next, we'll attach all of our design and model files. For this exercise, we'll only use the ones listed in the training guide, but on an active project, you'll want to make sure to include all the files that have quantity item types in them as references in this file. So holding down the Control key, we'll select the DSGN, the Model Detail 61, the Model Mainline 61, and the Model US 98. And we can click through each of the dialogues to accept each reference. Now you may be wondering why, if there's a master model DGN that has all of the model files already referenced in, why don't I just reference that one and use live nesting? We've found that if you use a reference with live nesting, you'll sometimes run into trouble when the displays get changed in the nested references. The safest bet is to attach each file on its own with no nesting to make sure that your reference files keep their display settings and you don't run into any trouble with the things you need not showing up in your file or in your reports. Once we've got all the default models referenced, we'll want to attach all of the model files again, except this time we'll select the 3D model in the attachments. So attach the Detail 61, Mainline 61, and US 98, and change the model to 3D, and click OK. Now let's attach the QTD SRD Complete DGN. We'll have to make this attachment several times. We have to attach it once for each pay item model in the file. So first, let's select the 11011 model. Then we'll attach it again and click OK, and select the 11022 model. And one more time, and pick the 110-410 model. Finally, we'll attach the terrain model. we need to browse up a level and select the Survey folder. Then locate the GDTMRD01 file and click OK. Once we've got all the references attached, let's fit the view. At this point, we're only seeing the 2D plan of the references, but we want to be able to see both the 2D and 3D. So to be able to get the 3D view, the first thing we need to do is set the terrain as active. So locate the green dashed outline and hover over it. We can see that this is the terrain model existing ground from the GDTM file. Right-click and select Set Terrain as Active. Once that's set, we can now right-click and hold in the file for the context menu and select View Control, Two Views, Plan and 3D. Adjust the display in both views. Once that's done, save settings and we can move on to the next exercise. For exercise 3.2, we'll be creating summary reports. But before we get started, let's take a tour of the Quantity Takeoff Manager dialog. Quantity Takeoff Manager is a new application created by the CAD office that is used to generate all the formatted summary reports. For reports that are automated, it will read the item type information from the files and use it to populate those reports. For non-automated reports, it generates the formatted template to be completed by the designer. Starting at the top, the most recent hotfix includes the application name and version number at the top of the dialog. Knowing which version of the tool you have can be helpful in troubleshooting as we release updates in the future. Next, there's a pull-down selector for the alignment options. You could use this to select a single alignment and generate a report for just that alignment. But for the estimated quantities report, we'll want all of our quantities included for all alignments in each table. Since the alignments are assigned to the elements with item types, we can leave the option set to all. I do recommend clicking the down arrow before generating the reports, though, to verify that the tool is reading the alignments from the file as expected. If you don't see any alignments listed in the pull-down, you may be in the wrong view, or you may not have your alignment referenced attached or displayed. Below that is the Summary Reports section. Here you'll find a list of all of the summary reports that can be on a project. If the report name is bold, it may be auto-populated from the item types in the file. If it is not bold, then it will only generate the blank template that you must then complete by filling in the table with the appropriate data. Then there are the selection tools. You can select all, select none, or you can invert whatever you selected. You can also select multiple specific files by holding down the Control key and selecting the reports you want to include. The Output Options section starts off with the file output location. This should default to the Project's Calculations folder. If it does not have that path showing in green, there may be a problem with your installation or workset file paths, so you definitely want to troubleshoot that, since that could cause problems with other applications. If you need to redirect the path, maybe to a subfolder or a different location for QC files, you can click the button at the end and specify the path you'd like. All the final summary reports for the Estimated Quantities Report PDF, though, should be kept in the Calculations folder. You can always leave the Include References box checked. As we saw in the last exercise, most of our quantities will be generated from the references, so we want the tool to read those and include them in the reports. And you can check Open Output files if you're only generating a couple of reports and want to see them right away. If you have it checked, it will open a new instance of Excel for each report created, and if you have a lot of reports selected, it will bog things down and open a lot of Excel windows. Down at the bottom of the dialog, there are three buttons. The Compute button will generate the summary report selected, either populated or as blank templates depending on the selections. The Create PDF button is a shortcut to launch the Summary Reports Builder tool. And when you're done with Quantity Takeoff Manager, you can click Close. Now let's continue with the exercise. I still have open my QTD-SRD-02 from the last exercise. On the Open Roads Modeling workflow, in the FDOT tab, the Quantities Tool group has one button, and that's the Takeoff Manager. I want to make sure that I have the 2D model active. The Quantity Takeoff Manager can only read the location data from the 2D alignment, so we'll always generate our reports from the 2D view. And that's why we've attached both the 2D and 3D model references to the 2D view in the last exercise. Let's go ahead and launch the Takeoff Manager. As we discussed before, let's click the Alignment Options pull-down and make sure all our alignments are being read. We'll leave the selection set to all. I'm going to click on the Summary of Clearing and Grubbing and Removal Items. It's not bold, so it will just create the blank template. Then I'll scroll down and hold down the Control button and select the Summary of Pavement. This one is bold and should create the report with the quantities from the files we've referenced. Now I have both summaries selected, I'll check that the output is going to the Project Calculations folder. And since I'm only creating 2 reports, I'll go ahead and check the Open Output File selection. Then click Compute. Now when we click Compute, we'll always get this warning message. It's actually a warning and a reminder. Since the file names are preset, if you already have any summaries in your Calculations folder, this will overwrite them. If there's anything you need to move or rename and save, this is the last chance to do that before you might lose any previous data. For now, I know that I want to create both of these files, so I'll click OK. Depending on how many summary reports you have selected and the amount of data being processed, creating the tables can take a little time. Once they finish processing, Excel will launch and open the files for us. Now that both Excel files are open, let's take a look at the summary report for clearing and grubbing and removal items. You can see that it's created a blank table with all the columns already set. We'll come back and fill that out in the next exercise. Now let's look at the summary of pavement. We can see that the Quantity Takeoff Manager has read the data from the files and completed the table for us, and has data from both the US 98 and SR 61 alignments. Now we can close both Excel files. Notice that there's a message from Takeoff Manager telling us that the reports were successfully created. That message lets you know, even if you don't have the Open Output Files option checked, if all of the files you selected were successfully created or if any failed. That's the end of this exercise. Next, we'll talk a bit about how to fill out those blank summary report templates. The summary reports that work with the quantity tools for FDOT Connect are slightly different than the ones that were delivered in previous software. The old templates from SS4 and SS10 will not work with the new quantity tools. If you'll notice in the image, the column letters across the top aren't sequential. That's because every summary table created by the Quantity Takeoff Manager comes from a master template that has columns for all the available summary reports. The columns that are displayed are the columns that are valid for that particular summary report. All other unused columns are hidden. Only the columns that appear when the file is created will be carried through to the PDF. So if you unhide a column, it still won't be available in the PDF for that summary report. Because we're using a master template, columns with similar information are grouped together. Regardless of which report is created, the format will be consistent. You'll always see the pay item information, followed by the quantity information, then the location data, and finally the notes and remarks. When the Summary Reports Builder tool reads the information from this Excel file to generate the Estimated Quantities Report PDF, it is not just a print to PDF function. Each cell in the table has a column and row designation that is used to transfer the data to the PDF. You should never add or delete columns from any of the tables, or your PDF will not come out right. So here are some do's and don'ts for the Excel summary tables. Don't modify the table. The columns and layout are formatted to be compatible with the tools to create the estimated quantities report. Don't leave any blank rows in the table. The Summary Reports Builder is reading the quantity data from each row in the file. If it gets to a row in a worksheet where there's not a quantity or secondary quantity, it sees that as the end of the file, and it goes on to the next worksheet. Anything in the worksheet after that blank row will be ignored and will not make it into the PDF. If you reach the 60th row of the template and you still have more quantities, you'll need to copy the Sheet 1 worksheet and rename it to Sheet 2, Sheet 3, and so on. Make sure to use the capital S and don't leave a space before the number. Any worksheet named anything other than sheet and number will be ignored by the Summary Reports Builder. That also means you can include additional worksheets in any of your Summary Report Excel files for backup documentation without worrying if it will show up in the PDF, as long as they're named differently from the sheet number format. As I mentioned before, the Summary Reports Builder is not a print-to-PDF tool. What you see in the Excel file is not what you'll get in the PDF. Adjusting the column widths in Excel will not affect where the word wrapping happens in the PDF. Using the decimal rounding format in Excel won't carry through. It will include the full value of the number that's in the cell. And the page breaks in the PDF probably won't correspond to the last row of each worksheet in the Excel file. So you won't want to try to add the pay item in a continued description at the top of each worksheet because it won't line up with the top of the page in the PDF. Remembering that the Excel rounding doesn't carry through to the PDF, make sure that all quantity values entered are rounded to the correct precision based on the Basis of Estimates Chapter 2. Keep in mind that all values are calculated to one additional significant digit. So if the BOE table shows a round to 1 decimal place, round the total quantity to 1 decimal place, and the proposed calculated quantity should be rounded to 2 decimal places. One last thing to keep in mind is to not change the names of any of the Excel files. The Summary Reports Builder uses the file name to determine the columns and format that goes into the PDF. If you try to include an Excel file with a name that is not exactly as it is listed in the Quantity Takeoff Manager, you'll get an error. The only exception to this is if you have a project with a funding sequence number where the FPID should be included in the file name and summary title, or for a summary of structures quantity where there is a structures number. Then you'll need to append the file name with a space, dash, space, followed by the FPID or structure number. While we're on the subject of file names, I just wanted to include this reminder. Each time you create a summary report from Quantity Takeoff Manager, that warning pops up that you will overwrite any existing files. Try not to get immune to seeing that pop-up. If you have spent a lot of time manually filling out one of the non-automated reports and someone accidentally creates a new blank template, it will overwrite all your hard work. You can protect against this by setting the properties of the file to read-only or by creating a backup in another location once you've got the table completed. One of the biggest challenges in the quantities workflow is filling out those summary report tables when they aren't automated or when we have a project-specific pay item that isn't part of the automation. So we've developed a workflow, or you might say a workaround, that allows us to leverage the automated quantities tools to help us fill out those tables. I'll start out by saying if you use this process, make sure to be careful not to overwrite any other quantity reports and make sure to thoroughly document how your quantities were generated. Part of that documentation is giving each non-automated pay item its own model in the QTD-SRD file. Even for the 3D meshes, you can copy those into a quantity shapefile as a 3D model. As for any other pay item in the QTD-SRD, we'll reference in the alignment and any other files we need to copy in the lines, cells, meshes, or to help create quantity shapes for this pay item model. The next thing we need to do is pick a temporary item type that has similar units of measure. In the previous exercises, I chose to use the ditch pavement item type because there isn't any other ditch pavement on this project, and I didn't have to worry about interfering with any other quantities. It also has a square yards unit of measure, which is the unit I need for some, or can be easily converted for others, of the temporary items I needed. And it has several different pay items within that item type, so I could use it as a replacement for several non-automated pay items and keep them together in one temporary report. That may not be the best fit for every project, but try to find the best item type and report to fit the needs of your project. Once we've picked the temporary item type and the pay item number to use within that item type, we can use the Item Types Attach tool to apply that item type to our elements. Since we're documenting how we got these quantities, aside from using the correct pay item number in the name of the model in the QTD-SRD, another thing we can do is to also include the correct pay item number in the design notes of the temporary item type. This also makes it easier to spot the groups if you have more than one temporary pay item in the same temporary report, as you'll see in the next exercise. Then we can generate the summary report that includes the temporary item type. In our example, we will generate the summary of ditch pavement, but if you chose a different item type, you'll need to make sure to pick the correct report for that item type. Once you've created the report, I recommend renaming and moving that file to another location, so you don't accidentally include it with the other reports in the Calculations folder. A subfolder within the Calculations folder is a great way to maintain that documentation of how you generated the quantities. At that point, you'll have all the quantity data you need to fill out the correct summary report. You'll need to type in the correct pay item number, description, and units of measure. Then you can copy the quantity and location data from the temporary file. If you're adding this information to another report that was already automated, you may have to move some of the data around to insert the pay item in the correct order. Now that we've talked about the workflow, let's jump into the next exercise and see how it works. For this exercise, we'll continue in the QTD-SRD-02. Make sure the 2D view is active, and on the FDOT tab, we'll launch the Quantity Takeoff Manager. If you recall from a previous exercise, when we set up the model in the QTD-SRD-01 for removal concrete, we assigned the item type for ditch pavement. And when we created this QTD-SRD-02 file, we attached models from the QTD-SRD-01 complete file in the dataset, where I also created models for you to use that have the clearing and grubbing items set with alternate ditch pavement pay items. In the Takeoff Manager, check the alignment to make sure they're all showing up, then select the Summary of Ditch Pavement. Verify the output options and check Open Output File, then click Compute. The file will open as a summary of ditch pavement. Notice that in the quantities, each entry has the correct clearing and grubbing and removal pay item numbers showing in the design notes. Let's close this file and move it and rename it. On the FDOT tab in the Resources Tool Group, select Explore Directories, Current Work Set. Let's browse up a level and select the Calculations folder. Right-click and create a new folder, and we'll name it Temp. Now let's find the summary of ditch pavement and move it into that folder. Right-click and select Rename, and let's change the name to Summary of Clearing and Grubbing and Removal Items Temp. That will help to provide that documentation I was talking about of where our non-automated quantities were generated. Now we can open both the Summary of Clearing and Grubbing and Removal Items, the template we created in Exercise 3.2, as well as the temporary file we just created. Let's adjust them so that we can see both at the same time, because we'll be jumping back and forth between these two files. In the temporary file, we still have a little conversion to do. The clearing and grubbing and selective clearing and grubbing 110.11 and 110.22 pay items both need acres as the units of measure, so we'll need to adjust our quantities. In the AQ column on the first row, let's enter the formula equals W4 divided by 4840. That will convert the square yards to acres. Then you can copy that cell and highlight all the rows in that column that go along with the 11 or 22 pay items. Then right-click and select Paste Formula. You can click in any cell and see that it automatically increments the row number when it's pasted as a formula. Now highlight all the cells with the converted values in them and change the Excel number settings from General to Number and set the precision to be 3 decimal places. A couple of things to note here. Remember that using this style of formatting won't hold through the PDF. We'll take care of that in the next few steps. Also, something to keep in mind when choosing which units to use and convert. This particular conversion works because we're converting square yards to acres, and any quantity we lose due to rounding is negligible. However, if you were converting the other way, from a larger unit of measure that was already rounded down to a smaller unit of measure, the quantities would definitely be inaccurate due to rounding. So now we have our temporary report converted and ready to go. Let's start putting that data into our Summary of Clearing and Grubbing and Removal Items report. On the first row, we'll type in the pay item number. Make sure to type it in BOE format or it won't be compatible for upload to Designer Interface later. 0110 space space 1 space space 1. Next, on the same row in the description column, type in clearing and grubbing. Make sure that the description you type in here matches the BOE description exactly as well. Then, in the units, type in LS, and for quantity P and total quantity P values, enter 1. Then, in the secondary quantity unit, type in AC. Now we can select all the converted quantity data from the temporary file for the 110.11 pay item and right-click and select Copy. Here's where we're going to strip the formatting. Open a Notepad document. Then we can right-click and paste the values. You can type Notepad in the search bar to find it and launch it. This will eliminate all those trailing decimal places that Excel would have kept, even if you pasted values only within Excel. Once they've been pasted in Notepad, you can select them all again and paste them into our new worksheet in the secondary quantity P column. Right-click and select Paste Values. Back in the temporary file, let's highlight and copy all the location data for this pay item. Right-click and copy, Then, in the New table, right-click in the first row in the Alignment column cell and select Paste Values. One more thing to wrap up this pay item in the new report, and that's to include the total acres value in the Design Notes column. We can let Excel do the math for us in the temporary file. In the next column over, enter the formula equals Y4 divided by 4840. Change the number settings to number and the precision to 2 decimal places. Since this is just the one value, we can just type it into the new report in the Design Notes column. 9.18 total AC. Now we can do the next pay item. Remember, don't leave any blank rows. So in the very next row of the table, type in 0110 space 2 space 2. In the description, type selective clearing and grubbing, areas with trees to remain. And in the units, type AC. Now, in the temp file, let's select all the converted quantities for the 11022 pay item. We'll copy and paste the values into the Notepad file. Then we can copy them again and paste values into the new table in the Quantity P column this time. Select the first cell in the first row of the pay item, right-click, and paste values. This time we need to put the total quantity in the Total column. So let's let Excel do the math again, and in the temp file, on the same row with the square yards total for 11022, on the next column beside our converted quantities, let's type the formula equals Y11 divided by 4840. Then in the new report, we can type in that value, 3.87, in the Total Quantity P column. Back to the temp file, and let's select the location data rows and columns for the 11022 pay item. Right-click and copy. In the new report, locate the alignment column on the first row of the pay item, right-click in that cell and select Paste Values. Once again, make sure not to leave any blank rows. And on the next line, let's type in the next pay item, 0110 space 4 space 10. Removal of existing concrete, and the units are square yards, so SY. Since the unit of measure matched the temp file, this is a simple procedure to highlight all the quantity and location data from the temp file. Right-click and copy. Then, in the new report, right-click in the first cell of the quantity column and paste values. This should complete all the data for this pay item, and you should have a completed summary of clearing and grubbing removal items and a documented temporary file with all the converted quantities included. Save and close both Excel files. And that's the end of this exercise. Thank you for joining me today for the CAD Office series for FDOT Connect. This was Chapter 3 of the Automated Quantities Workflow.